Well, good morning. Atheists, agnostics, free thinkers, whatever you like to call yourself, you are welcome here. At Seattle Atheist Church, we call ourselves an atheist church because you will never hear anything supernatural talked about from the podium. We're founded on the principles of scientific naturalism and secular ethics. And what we do is anyone is invited to give a talk, anyone who's a regular member. And then afterwards, we usually put our chairs in a circle and then have a chance for a discussion. That's how it usually works. So today's talk is about changing self-defeating habits. And we want to talk about what we know about changing self-defeating habits. So unlike a self-help talk, which was pulled out of a wishful thinking drawer, we're going to try to base as much as possible on research. So a lot of this talk is based on this book, Rewire, How to Change Your Brain and Break Bad Habits, Overcome Addictions, and Conquer Self-Destructive Behavior by Richard O'Connor. He has previously been the executive director at the Northeast Center for Family Service and Mental Health. He's interested in how we rewire the brain to affect our unconscious. Thus the name of the book, Rewire. So he empathizes with people who find themselves in that situation where they know what to do, but they just can't seem to bring themselves to do it. And he attempts to explain why that might be and to help us find some solutions. In this talk, I'm also going to bring in the work of B.J. Fogg, who's a behavioral psychologist at Stanford, who wrote the book Tiny Habits. So imagine two circles on the board behind me, one of them very large, and one of them very small. The larger circle represents the fact that 99% of our thinking is unconscious. O'Connor calls this 99% the automatic unconscious, and it includes the Freudian repressed unconscious material. And also everything else that Daniel Kahneman calls System 1. So all of your automatic unconscious thinking, your physical skills like blinking, breathing, walking, chewing, your feelings, snap judgments, beliefs, motives, assumptions, and biases. So why is it that we do about 99% of our thinking unconsciously? And it's because that system can do this work simultaneously and without effort. It's much faster than System 2 thinking. So when we see a garden hose in the grass and we startle, it's our System 1 that has yelled, "Snake!" Signaling danger takes priority over thinking, "I wonder what that shape reminds me of." Now the other 1% of our thinking is our conscious thinking that we have to take effort to do. That's a thinking that Kahneman calls System 2 thinking. And most of us know that we can get better at System 2 thinking. In fact, next week we'll have a talk about Daniel Kahneman's work, and he really emphasizes how to be better at System 2 thinking. In other words, you're going to make all these decisions with System 1, you have your biases, you're not very good at thinking statistically, but then we're going to learn how to check our thinking with System 2 thinking. So we know that we can get better at this System 2 thinking. Ironically, very few people ever actually make an effort to do so and to make use of available resources to develop our critical thinking skills. Now, those thinking skills help us overcome the lazy thinking that results from System 1 thinking. But we do realize that we can study and learn new things and develop that conscious part of our brains. But the problem is, how do you change that System 1 unconscious automatic part of your brain, given that it's where 99% of the action occurs? So in the last 10 years, 4 to 10 years really, but beginning about 10 years ago, we've learned a lot more about how human beings continue to grow brain cells and how we create connections between brain cells. So we can actually change our effortless activity. For example, a researcher named Alvaro Pascual Leon had subjects play the piano with one hand. And within 5 days, there were measurable differences in the part of the brain that were fired up when somebody practiced with the one-hand piano. So every time we engage in an activity, we make it more likely that we can do it again with less effort. It can even become habitual. It's difficult to navigate downhill on a curvy road on your bike when you're first learning, but it can become automatic. And so our brain literally changes in response to our action. So I want to pause there. I think pretty much everyone knows, but I want to make sure everyone knows the brain. The biking triggered me to think of it. So we know next week, because we're not going to have use of the parking lot, next week we're going for a bike ride instead of going to be here. And because the whole point is to not park, it's in 2 weeks. That's in 2 weeks. Sorry, May 22nd? Yeah. Okay, on May 22nd. Sorry about that. And we'll have to, if you want to, there is a members-only Facebook group where we will be posting the specific details about. It'll be somewhere nearby, but the whole point is to not have to park here. So if you're interested in that, please, or if you're just interested in being in that discussion group, the reason it's private is just to avoid trolls. That's all. There's a public one, there's a private one. Private one is troll-free. Okay, so if you are practicing something, you actually change your brain by simply practicing it over and over again. You can also change your brain by visualizing the actions when it's not possible to do it. So you can practice your dance moves, and you can also imagine yourself doing your dance moves while you're just laying in bed at night, and actually the research shows that that actually does improve your performance. But the system 1 thinking is extremely resistant to change because it interprets the world through established patterns. And those established patterns then limit what we can see. So we can't see our own biases, in other words. The established neural pathways, neurons that are wired together fire together. And then they make up a self-fulfilling prophecy of selective focus. We choose friends and work and travel and news programs and entertainment that all reinforces the biases that we already have. Okay, so one way to shake things up is to try to expose yourself to new ideas, right? But this established way of thinking, you can think of it as your paradigm. And O'Connor is a psychotherapist, and so of course one of the ways that he thinks that you can identify your paradigms is through the working with a therapist who can ask you questions and point out inconsistencies and all of that. But you can also do that work for yourself. So the way to identify your paradigms is to pay very close attention to your thoughts and experiences as well as to your feelings. He recommends that you journal a lot. Now this keeps coming up a lot, like people recommending journal. So look for patterns, question your thoughts, and practice mindfulness where you just allow your feelings and your thoughts to bubble up without needing to attach meaning to them. So in other words, let them come and let them go as opposed to feeling that you need to justify them. Do you find thoughts and feeling patterns which reoccur? And are there any that you think might be problematic? So in the book, he goes through a whole lot of different patterns. For example, the rebellion pattern, entitlement, and anxiety. So especially like, for example, if you are a person who is used to, who has a sense of entitlement, it can be very, very difficult for people to name that in themselves. And so the fear pattern is one that is really uncomfortable for people. They notice that in themselves, more likely to notice that in yourself. But you try to identify a paradigm which is driving your behavior and then practice corrective behavior. Okay, so consider it like sort of a psychic gym. So how do we, what kinds of corrective behaviors? So for example, learning to make eye contact with others and listening to the sounds of people's voices. If you're trying to think up your own reply while they're talking, stop yourself and just focus on hearing what someone has to say. If you have a feeling of entitlement and you find yourself judging other people or comparing yourself to other people, he considers a corrective action doing something humbling. So help someone, volunteer, intentionally do what you consider to be more than your share. Get your hands dirty. Don't try to take control in the situation. Don't call attention to yourself. And then the section on anxiety and fearfulness I thought was really interesting. If you have a lot of fear, you might have an underlying paradigm that the world is a dangerous place, okay? So if you have an automatic self which believes that the world is a dangerous place, you may find yourself being a people pleaser and trying to avoid conflict. So what he recommends as a corrective view on that, of corrective behavior, is that you might find yourself not being willing to share your point of view, or just not lying by outright lying, but lying through omission. You know, being in situations where you're with somebody, you want them to like you, they're saying something, it's making you uncomfortable, and you just kind of withhold. Okay, and so connection, this also connects with the book that we read before, or a method that we were trying to kind of bring in for us to use collectively, from the book called Crucial Conversations. And some people are confronters and some people are avoiders. So if you fall into the avoider category, consider that what might be driving that, like if there's a paradigm driving that. Okay, so if you don't share your point of view, then eventually you feel like you're not really known, so you can't feel really connected. You could become uneasy, you could become ashamed because you haven't told the truth. You could start accumulating rage, okay? Anger, he says, anger is sadness's bodyguard. Okay? Sometimes we don't want to feel the sadness, but we feel angry. If you can get in touch with your anger, that might be a first step. And, you know, oof, this is not good stuff, right? So his recommendation on how to get out of this particular cycle is to tell the truth as you see it. Avoid white lies, omissions, distortions. Don't evade responding. Express your opinion. And you could do this in a mild-mannered, polite, assertive, but non-confrontational way. Now, I'd like to point out that because you have the internal paradigm that you have that wants to protect itself and maintain itself, you will be in some danger when you do this. You may tremble, you may cry, your heart will pound, your mouth will go dry. That's why you don't want to do it. Right? Kind of know that to take that risk, this is likely what will happen. And so it's a kind of a paraphrase of a quote by Winston Churchill, but it's one of my favorite quotes. The only way out is through. Okay, practice. Now, he just points out again, you're unaware of your paradigms, and you have a whole lot of classic defense mechanisms in place to maintain them. Denial, projecting it onto someone else, rationalizing, distorting. And these paradigms, these mental paradigms, can actually affect our bodies. And they can make changes in the brain, the nervous system, the endocrine and digestive systems. Chronic anxiety can even result in damage to the hippocampus. So that part of the body that is responsible for calming us down can shrink, and then we actually have difficulty consolidating memory, we might feel confused, and the more we have experienced anxiety, the more likely we are to be triggered to set it off. So we need to practice through mindfulness. We can learn to identify our own common defenses. Journal. Journal about disappointments and self-destructive behaviors, and look for your biases and faulty conclusions. Notice when blocked emotions leak out. A lot of times when parents shout at kids, that might be a sign. Reality will catch up to you in the end. Okay, so that's dealing with what O'Connor calls the really deep stuff of System 1, your paradigms, okay? Now, what if it isn't all that deep and it's not related to childhood trauma and whatever? Like, it's not always all that, right? And that's why I'm bringing in also BJ Fogg. So BJ Fogg is a behavioral psychologist, and his thing is just like, why do you decide you're going to floss your teeth and then continue to forget to do it? Or, you know, that kind of thing. And what he says is that when we go to change a habit, what we fail to realize is that usually a habit is actually a set of steps. There are a lot of little habits that make up the big habit. You want to take your lunch to work, but before you can take your lunch at work, you got to get in the habit of packing the lunch. You've got to store your Tupperware or your wax paper or whatever someplace where it's easily accessible. You need to have grocery shop the stuff and have it there, maybe prepped in the fridge. You have to have gone to the, you know, made the list that you even decided what you were going to eat. Like, when you want to change one thing, you want to look and see what is the whole stream of things, and then start way back here with that, making that a habit. The second thing he says is tie that habit to something that you already automatically do. So in keeping with this whole idea of System 1, you know, if you want to start taking a vitamin or something, put it right on top of your coffee maker. If you go to that coffee maker every day, then you're going to see it there, okay? Put the signs in places, put up reminders in places where you're definitely going to see it. You know, the bathroom mirror, the refrigerator door, that kind of thing. And then the third thing is, every time you take a micro step in the right direction, cheer for yourself, give yourself positive reinforcement. And in experimenting with this, and I think we actually gave a whole talk on the tiny habits thing, I can tell you from personal experience that that step of cheering for yourself, even when you have a big win, can be hard, and it's especially difficult when you're just way up here with the habit, right? So maybe we do a 30-mile bike ride, we're like, yeah, we did the bike ride, 30 miles. But what about just making sure that your helmet and your light and your windbreaker or whatever is somewhere easily accessible? That's the level at which BJ Fogg wants you to start cheering for yourself. Like each little step in the right direction, woo, we're on the right path, whatever. Okay, so these are some of the ways that we can start changing and automating the System 1 in the right direction. Next week, we're going to talk about cognitive biases and how we can use our System 2 or very logical executive function thinking to correct for when we make a System 1 error. Okay, so that's next week with the book Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. So I'm really excited to see new people coming to church. I hope you come back and talk with us, because this is kind of we're all of us together figuring out how it works. And the way that we end every service is the same. It's with this: atheists believe in good because good works in non-mysterious ways. Thank you.